All right, we're back. We are COMP125. That's client-side web development in the summer 2018 semester at Centennial, and it's week 12, part 3 of our broadcast. We're talking about NodeJS and Heroku. Let's recap a little bit what we did yesterday because the last couple of minutes of my video were cut off for some reason. So we did, I had this lesson 12. Just going to bring that lesson up for a second. And in lesson 12, we did this very simple node site. So I'm just going to run it. I'm going to use control backtick to kind of show my integrated terminal. You can also use view and then integrated terminal, whatever you like. And then once you're into your integrated terminal, again, one thing I like to do is run node. And the best way to do it is, of course, to use nodemon. So Junior, I know you were running it with node. Use nodemon, right? Because we talked about nodemon. What it does for us is, from a development perspective, it restarts our web server, right, upon any changes. Okay, so that's what it does there. And notice it gives us our address right here, right? We're going to monkey with this thing a little bit, and I'll talk about this a little bit. So this does this, and now we have hello world. But this isn't very cool. Come on, man. Let's prove that our Node.js server runs everything else. If I want to run Bootstrap or whatever, I should be able to do it, right? Because it's a node server. It's a server, right? So let's check this out. So first thing is our index.html page is very simple. So we have an index.html page. Hopefully everyone can see that, right? So very simple, nothing, index.html page, but this says document on it. We'll make this one our home page. Right, here's our home page. And we also have a 404 page. And this is something new. We haven't talked about making a custom 404 page. So a 404 page is a not found page, and there's some really cool things we can do with it. We can make it so it says like oops. We can put a maybe like just something. We can make a little TARDIS. Put a TARDIS in there. We can put some kind of unicorn. That's like GitHub does. Says, oh guys, come on, you missed it. Or sometimes what happens with GitHub also, it shows you the octocat and kind of says something like, hey, you know what? The page you're looking for is not found, right? People do a lot of interesting things there because you don't want to make users feel like it's a bad thing. They put the wrong link in, kind of thing. And hey, go back to the other page you found, right? As opposed to error. Error is always a bad thing to say, right? It's an error. Oh my God, what did I do? Right, the page not found. That's what the 404 is, and this is what you can do with custom error pages. And you can make other ones. You can make a custom 500 page. You can make a bunch of other stuff that would also work just as well. And that's what we did. So we have these two pages. Let's take a look at the index.js. So in my index.js last time around, at the end we updated it. So we have now 3 pieces. Right, we have our HTTP bundle that we're using. This is bundled with the modules bundled with Node.js, as well as the file system bundle or package and the path module. All those 3 things, right? And we used all of them in different ways. Each one of them has different functionality. And again, I invite you to look at the Node.js API. It's really important for us to know how to use stuff. So if I go to nodejs.org, right? And if I showed you this yesterday, if I go to docs, there's a couple of APIs here. One is the version 8.11.3 API, which is a long-term support release. We've been using this one, 10. Whatever. So it doesn't matter which one you look at. They're slightly different, one and the other. They're getting closer, 8 and 10, right? It's kind of weird. But 10 is almost like the bleeding edge of features, where 8 is the kind of the standard stable release, right? So if you look at what we were doing, and if I wanted to take a look at the path module, here's the path module. So if you look at path, and you can see that there is ext name, which is what we were going to use, right? So if you don't know what it is, path.xname, that's the path module, ext name. If I click onto it, it'll give you some examples. Say, look, it's what it does. It returns the .html piece. And again, just to make this bigger, because I know I'm in a time warp. Hold on a second. John, I'm in a time warp again. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I thought it was not big enough. But anyways, Yeah, so what this does, maybe I'll increase the magnification here so you guys can see. So path.xname is actually the extension name. That's what it does. It takes the extension name, HTML or MD or whatever, and that's what we're able to do with the path so far. There's other amazing things you can use path for, like dir name to get the directory name. That's important too. Sometimes you want to get the directory name of the path. For example, this is my whole directory name, and I want to be able to get that, and I want to be able to capture that when I'm from my operating system somehow. I want to get that. So that's part of the stuff it also does. I'm just going to go back up to the top with the index. This is the index, right? So delimiter, dir name, x name, which is the extension name, format, join. This is something we use a lot. Path.join. So if you look at path.join, I want to say that foo and bar, right, and baz, ASDF, right, and quux, right. So basically what it does is it returns foo, bar, baz, ASDF, right. So how we use this thing is when I want to join public in front of my path, right. So let's say, for example, I want to assume that my regular stuff for CSS and JavaScript is inside of a public folder. So I might have a public top-level folder on the root, and then underneath that I might have scripts and content and something else, right? And then I don't want to put in something like /public/ whatever. I don't want to do that. I want to join public to my path. So public is always going to be in my path. Same thing with views. I don't want to go /views/ whatever. I might join views to my path, right? So then all of a sudden I can just say / whatever content or partials, right? And I can get in there, right? So we're going to see this path join next week. We're going to see this in use next week when we actually join different parts to our path, right? It's a very common module that we use throughout Node.js when we start setting up our server, okay? So path.join. So again, a couple modules. We're not going into every one of them because, again, this is kind of an intro course into how to do stuff. So it's not like we're doing things in a lot of depth, but it's enough to get you going. So to understand where to look for your API documentation, that's really important when you're making a Node server. And okay, let's take a look at the next one. So if I go back, so this is just this. On the left, we also use the file system. So here's the file system API. And what we also used in the file system was this. There's a bunch of ways to do stuff. There's read stream. We're not reading a stream. There's stats if I want to get some statistics. A write stream if I want to read and write streams. I can access stuff. I can read file. And yesterday we did read file, right? So if I go back, file system dot read file. Here it is. There's two. There's read file and read file sync. Read file sync is, as you might guess, synchronous. I don't know if I want to use that. I mean, it's there, but I recommend doing this one. File system read file. And what it does is it gives you some options, right? So read file, we say here's the path that I want to read for the file. And then I have a callback function. That's what I used yesterday. A callback function with two pieces, error, if any error code comes through, if there's an error, and data, the data that houses your content, whatever that is, that's coming from the file that you're reading. So when I read a file using a file system in Node.js, it contains the entire file, all the HTML, all the JavaScript, whatever you want inside this data stream, right? And then what I can do is I can do something with that data, like show it on the screen. Okay, so that's kind of the file system. That's what we used yesterday. Again, this is where we got this one from. And there's many other things we use in the file. And then, of course, the big one we used yesterday was HTTP, the HTTP module. And notice there's also HTTPS for secure HTTP. That's what that is, right? And if you look at HTTP, you also might see something like, if you go scroll down, hold on a second. I'll answer you in a second. Here's your client request, HTTP client request. And then there's your server. So this is what we made yesterday, HTTP server, right? That's the class. Remember I talked about this as being something called a factory, right? So what it does when you make a new HTTP server, you actually create a factory. That's what it does, all right? So it has two, like it says, there's two parts of the HTTP server. One of them is the request piece, and the other one is the response, right? Just like we know We send a request to the server to get information about a URL, some kind of site, index.html is a good example, and then the server responds with something. And if you go through this, it gives you some examples, just like we've seen, where we have this, require HTTP, our request for request response, those two things when we create a server, and then this res end. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this. There's connect, there's close, connect. These are all the different pieces. It tells you what all these pieces do, right? So if you don't know what something does, right, you can always go through. Here's our listen. There's also a listen module, and if you want to see an example of that, you can actually click on it. So here's server.listen, and it'll show you how to do listening. So you can actually use server.on, right, which is like equivalent to add event listener, error. On error, do something, right? And they give you some examples of how to do stuff in terms of what each piece means: the port, the host, the path, backlog, which is really this what you're listening on, the kind of like an event callback, right? And then this is a good example of I want to listen on host, localhost on port 80, and I want to make it exclusive. And exclusive is true. It says the handle is not shared, so you can't port share. All right, so it kind of takes over port 80. And there's a bunch of different signatures. Notice that there's a signature that looks like this that only takes the path. Another one that only takes that either takes the port or the host, either one or the other. And of course, or backlog. The square brackets are kind of optional. That's what it means. Square brackets means it's optional to give me the port, the host, the backlog of the callback. You can literally just put in listen by itself, and then you can fill in the stuff later, post, port, host, whatever you want, later on. So really, really cool. And we've used this stuff yesterday, but this is the documentation. This is where you get this piece. So going back to this, I'm just going to go scroll up to the top. So whenever you look at the API documentation for Node, it's not, completely disorganized. I think it's pretty cool in terms of, how it's laid out. I don't think it's, completely messed up, right? Like sometimes you look at a piece of API documentation, you're like, oh God, where do I look now, right? I have no idea how it's, separated, how it looks like. So here's one, response end. Some people asked me about yesterday, response end. Let's take a look at response end. This is under HTTP server response. That's the class. And of course, our response, our res property is of type http.server-response. That's what it is, right? So if you look at the end, which is right here, it tells you what it does, right? So if you're kind of don't know what it does, it says, well, here's the data. You have data, encoding, callback, and returns. And it says this method signals to the server that all of the response headers and body have been sent, and that the server should consider this message complete. The method response.end must be called on each response. So it's required. You can't skip this part when it comes to this simple Node, kind of server. And we also did this response.write head. So those are the two things we did. So response.end, and if you look back up here, so if you look at the again the documentation, right? Here's write head right here. Here's the documentation for write head. We did this one. There's set header, and we did this one. We saw this one, and we also did write head. Write head is what we use in our code. So if you look at write head, you can see again that response.write head. We have to put in the response code, the status code. So 200, we're good. The content type is important. The content length is optional. Content length, I mean, you can actually kind of measure how big the length is. So you're specifically telling the server that you're going to measure how many bits or bytes, if you will, is the entire message. Because really we're sending messages, right? A message to the server saying, hey, server, I need a page. Server says, okay, hold on. Here it is, right? And then that hold on is like in milliseconds, right? And so this is important to take a look at. I mean, so here's the header. Here's my content type. In this particular case, it's text HTML. And we can set other things in the header. And headers are really important to know because one of the errors we get when we use Node is you're resetting the headers. You'll get this really weird, funny error sometimes, and you're like, why am I resetting the headers? Because you're doing this twice. You can only set the headers once when it comes to a response. So what that means is you can't set the content type and again, once you've set it one time, you can't redo this. Because remember what this does, this is a factory. So it takes all the data that you're giving it and creates the instance, for example, of your server, right? So your server instance has whatever you're responding with, right? In this particular case, we're responding with, a content of HTML, right? And then we're writing the head. So a set header is one part. We're setting the header for content type, and then write head writes the 200. And basically, we can actually write the content type of the header, the head, to text plain or whatever we want. Notice that we're actually res end with OK, right? And that's actually going to print out OK, which is kind of weird, right? OK. So that's kind of weird. But this idea of setting headers and ending a response, we need to end a response when it comes to when we receive one. So going back to our code, let's interpret some of this now. Like we want to look at this one more time, okay? So again, here I'm making a server identifier, okay? So a new variable. It's actually not a variable, it's a constant. A new constant called server. Server is going to house this new object that we're going to create with the create server method. That's what we're doing, right? And we're having a request and response. These two request and response parameters are being passed in. This is a fat arrow function. And remember how this translates? This is new ECMAScript 6, ECMAScript 2015 syntax. It's the same as writing this, right? It's the same as writing this, just taking away this thing. Like literally just, that's the difference, right? However, there's other nuances, other things that are happening when you use fat arrow functions that are happening when you don't use them. For example, it passes in the context this, right? And you want that a lot of times, right? So let's go back to this. It's not exactly identical. Okay, so this is request response, and then we create a file path. We add this dot. Now we don't have to do it this way. This is just the way I did it. There's also another piece here that we can probably load, another module called URL. Okay, and if you're going to go back, and if you looked at the module, there's the URL module, right? And what does it do, right? You can see that URL, I can get the path name from the URL, right? So that's another way we could have done it. I could also get the port from the URL, the protocol from the URL, HTTP or TCP or FTP or whatever the kind of protocol is, right? Or the username, and so on. There's a lot of stuff that is included in Node, and again, unfortunately, I cannot cover it all, right? But the way you import it, you kind of do one of these, require URL, right? And then it talks about, which is URLs, it's quite complex. It houses a lot of information on that URL line. Like this URL line that we're seeing right here, HTTPS, that's the protocol type, right? And then this is the host name. And then this is the subdirect. These are directories, right? These parts right here. And then this is the actual, the page we're getting. This is the page. These are folders, right? Typically, this is the host name, right? This is the protocol, right? And all this stuff you can access with your URL. One thing that's missing on our URL, there is no port. The port is assumed to be 80 for all web stuff, right? But you can actually switch ports or whatever, especially inside an internal website. For example, if I'm doing an internal website, not an external website, right? Intranet instead of extranet, right? So instead of being, I have my company intranet, and it's only my web pages are only available inside my company. Outside, it's blocked. Can't go in there, right? But for example, I want to make a wiki page for some project I'm making, but I don't want it to be external to my page. I can make it so that that is an intranet site, and maybe it runs on port 8080 or something like that, right? That's okay. Yeah, so it does the URL. What is this thing? It kind of, how do you use it? So const my URL is equal to a new URL, right? And I'm looking at /foo, right? So I can create new URLs. And these are, I want you to think about them as sanitized URLs. What I mean by that is it actually is of type URL. And sometimes some objects in Node require it to be of type URL, not string, right? And because it has other stuff on it, right? For example, this HTTPS:// when you make it of type URL, what you're actually doing is this protocol is preserved because it's of type URL, and you can extract that later on easily, right? And I'm going to keep going, but there's some other stuff. Here's a good example of that, where you can actually interpret URLs of different languages, and a bunch of other stuff, and you can extract pieces of the URL. So here's URL hash. This might be something very similar. I have my foo hash bar, and I want to get the URL hash. I can just do the same thing with Node instead of location.hash, like we've been using in our JavaScript, right? URL.host. I want just the host piece of the URL. I can do that too, right? And I can just get this one piece because it's the URL. I can go through and I can just extract this part, right? But notice that it also grabs the port, right? So this part, the host, also grabs not just the example org, but also this, right? The host name itself. So this is the host, and this is the host name, which only grabs this part here, okay? And the href, which is the whole link, basically, the whole thing, okay? The origin, okay, what is that origin, which is usually this part, the first part, which is the protocol and the host name, right? And a bunch of other ones. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's the path name, which gets the path, the port, if I want the port, right, and so on. So you can extract a lot of the stuff we have just from using URL. And I'm showing you this because these are the most common things we use throughout Node, right? These common bundled modules. So later on when we do Express, and you're like, damn, wouldn't it be great if we had the host name? Import your URL module, and then you can have whatever you want, right? And the file system and the URL modules are the most commonly used modules when it comes to file manipulation, modifying the host name, all that kind of stuff, or understanding where you're coming from, getting referrals, and there's so many other pieces that you can do here. And that's why I think Node is such a great environment. I think it's an amazing little environment. It's open source. You understand everything is well documented, and it's up to date, right? Whereas if you look at some PHP documentation, you're like, it didn't work, because your PHP version is 7, and you're trying to use some PHP that was from version 5, and it doesn't work, right? And it's all over the place. It's getting better though. I can't just keep pounding on PHP. PHP is still one of the most popular languages in the world. Anyways, so that's what this piece is. And if I go back, so we've done the file path where we get the URL, the URL from the requested message. The requested message comes forward, and the request usually is in the form of, hey, I want this URL, whatever the URL is, right? And I want to parse it. That's what I'm doing here. I'm parsing the URL. I'm taking the actual URL itself, and it's probably going to be something like that looks like this, index.html from the request. And then I'm adding a dot to it because, so it's probably /URL or just /. For example, if I go to my website for the first time and I go here, this is actually just the /. That's the URL that I'm going to get, right? / means I'm at the root, right? So I'm adding a dot to the /, which means this is the root of my document, right? And then what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, if I'm getting the root, then I really want the index.html page, right? Otherwise, if you don't put this in, you're going to get nothing, right? You can't like automatically assume it's going to be index.html unless you tell it to, because remember, we're doing server from scratch. So whatever we're doing on the server, we're telling little details, telling the server exactly what we want it to do, okay? So we get the extension name here, like we did again. I'm just going over this again. It's being stored in the xname variable. That's what it's being stored in. And then we're switching through. We're also making the default content type text HTML, which is what we're doing. And then if it's any other kind of content type, and we've only included a few, right? We're missing MD as an example, which is like a README file or whatever. And there's others. I'm not going to go through them all because we're not going to use this. Node is not the only way we're not going to stop at Node. We're going to actually go through it to Express, which is this middleware, this other software we're going to layer on top of Node next week, right? And you're going to see how much easier it is in some ways. It does a lot of this stuff for us, right? But we want to know the underlying system. We want to know because Express uses Node at the end of the day, right? So we need to know what Node is about. So then here's our file system. Here's our file system read file. And then in our read file, we pass the file path we just got, which is file path is way up here, whatever that file path was. So in other words, index.html, right? And then we go through it and we say, here's our callback function. In order for us to read the file path, I want to know if we got an error. If we get an error, so if error, that's the first thing we want to check. And here's our error codes. Okay, so let's look at Node.js error codes. Okay, so if I go back to this, again, I'm looking at the file system. And again, we have to talk about this because if we don't do this, you're going to go, so where did you get that? And how did you get that? Because Node can be very confusing, guys. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. If you don't know this even exists, some people don't even know this exists, right? So again, I'm going to read file. Here's my read file. And you can see that I have errors in here. So I can get, it talks about what read file does. Read file sync is platform specific. It does different things on Mac and so on. But I want to get this error thing. And sometimes it's buried. I think this one might be one of those times. Let me see if it is. I may have to just go into errors. Here it is. So here's the error, different kinds of errors. All right, so error codes, right? And I think there's a bunch of different ones, but these are specific errors like here, not file read error. So I can say node fs error codes. That's what we want. I wonder if this is the same thing I just looked at. Probably is the same thing. I want to get the error.code. And I want to see if I can give you some examples. Here they are. Okay, these are the ones. So this is the wrong version, but it still applies to us because they haven't changed much. So E8CCS, this is one error code. It says permission denied. An attempt was made to access a file in a way forbidden. So this is access. You can see that error is the first part, error, and the next part is access. It's almost the whole word. I don't know why they didn't include the whole word, but there might be a reason for it. Address and use, which we saw already one time yesterday, right? Connection refused. I'm not even going to read this part. I'm reading just this part. Connection reset, right? Okay, this one I need to read. File exists. An existing file was target of an operation that required that the target not exist. For example, I need to create a file. File already exists, right? Is directory, right? So we're trying to, we used a path. We expected it to be a file, but actually it's a directory, right? M file, all right. Too many open files in the system. So this is like a memory thing, right? E-no-ent, okay? E-no-ent, which is what we talked about, which is no such file or directory. Now this is something that's, doesn't make any sense. Like it's not intuitive. No ent. You can think about it as no entry, but that's not right. There is no such file or directory is what e-no-ent means. E-not directory. So it's not a directory. E-not empty. So not empty. Directory is not empty. We want to try and delete the directory or do something to the directory. It's not empty. E-perm. All right. So operation is not permitted. E-pipe. Some kind of broken pipe. Broken pipe means some kind of socket or port is closed and it's not allowing us to do something. And of course, timed out means that we're trying to connect to something and it's timed out, right? So these are the most common ones, and there's other ones too. But we can check for these like we've done inside of our code. We said, hey, if my error code is e-no-ent, that means file not found, right? That's what we're getting. That's what this file not found is. So this is file not found error, right? Then what we want to do is we want to use our custom. We want to read again. So we're reading file right here, but then we say, okay, stop reading this file. We don't care about that file. We want to read this file now. We want to redirect ourselves to read our custom 404 page. That's what we're doing here. If it's a file not found, right? This one, we could have done the same thing here. We could have said that if it's something else other than a file not found, we don't care what it is. It's something else. It's probably some kind of server error. And that's why I wrote sorry server error here. But you could have made a custom 500 page, by doing the same thing, having the same syntax here. Okay. Notice there's a lot of stuff that's the same. So theoretically, if you're a little bit of a you can make your own custom file, a custom error function, like show error or whatever, or go to error page. And depending on what the error is, you can have another function that kind of parses what kind of error it is and so on. Here it's just done all in one, right? And I'm not going to modify this too much again because we're going to move on to something else, right? Okay, so yeah, so this does everything we need to do. And at the bottom, this part here, this console log, it's interesting. There is no console log that runs. This console log doesn't run here on the server. Okay, it doesn't run here. So if I go right-click and inspect, there's nothing in the console, right? Like you'd expect normally to have console logs run in the console, but actually, this console log runs here in our terminal, right? So this is your console log right now, right? And that's the difference. When you first do Node, you're like, wait a minute, I did a console log. I want to get debugging information. How come I'm not getting it, right? Well, actually you are. It's in the terminal window, the thing that's running the server. Okay, so some differences between regular JavaScript and backend JavaScript. Yes?
Is that because it's like a server.listen?
Yeah. And the console.
This is server side.
So which console is I'm looking? The thing is, the console log, normally it's window.console. Remember, it's not just console. Console, which console is it? This is the server console. Server console is this, our terminal, right? Window console is the browser, right? And window is implied, right? When we use console log for JavaScript, right? But here, this is backend JavaScript, and the implied is the server console, right? Okay, so that's this piece. Notice we still can use template strings. This is the backtick, right? The one thing you can't do on a server is you can't use, that funny way. Typically, if I do %C, how we did that last time, and make so that we can color the server. Let's try this out, see what happens. So if I say I want to modify my message, so the console log is going to be blue, color blue. As an example, we did this before, and if I save it, we'd expect this to be blue, but actually we get the %C right here, right? So it doesn't have the same functionality as a regular console. It doesn't allow us to do this kind of stuff, okay? In fact, you have to change the color of the console to green and something else, all right, which we're not going to go into. But I wanted to point this out. It's different. This console log is different than the console log. And if you look where it says here, it says prints to std out, right? Standard out, which is C++ or C standard out, right? Which is different than so console log is familiar for us, but actually it's doing something else in the background. Okay. All right, so that's this piece. Any questions so far about the things we've talked about? You had a question. Did I cover that?
Documentation, meaning that with this technique we create multiple servers and run them.
You can make multiple servers. So the question is, can I make multiple servers and run them? I'm paraphrasing. The answer is yes, you can, but they have to run on different ports, typically, right? You can't share the same port because you'll get that in address and use. You get an address and use here, right?
Okay.
So example would be if I ran this again in another terminal, right? So I want to run multiple servers. Hold on. And when we did this last time, I want to run another terminal window, and then I just run the same thing. I kind of do node or nodemon again, nodemon. And if I did this, I'm going to get an address in use, right? Which is what I'm getting here. It says I got an unhandled error address in use, right? I'm trying to get this because guess what? I already running on port 3000.
So we
okay.
Just need to vary the ports.
Yes. So I'm going to kind of Control C this one and terminate the bash. Yeah, you can change the ports if you want to run on the same server. Or the other thing you can do is have multiple servers, and like we talked about, Dockerized. Put in a Docker container, which we're not going to cover. And a Docker container is like almost like a little container that you can have multiple pieces that run on the same port, but you're just accessing it through different port numbers. Not going to go into it right now. It's going to confuse you.
What's the range of ports available?
Oh, there's like tons of ports. So any port that's legal, you can use. 65535 is even a port. Let's try that here. So that's if I wanted to use some kind of crazy port here, like 65535, right? And if I kind of saved it, and now it's running on 65535. And if I ran it, look. Now, the reason why it says site can't be reached because 65535 is blocked. But there's some ports that's the higher end of the range. Like I'm going right to the top end. Like something. I think that's the biggest port you can use or something like that. Let's make something like something else. Instead of port 65535, let's you put port 6,000 or 10,000 here, port 10,000. And if I did that one, and I click on this, then we should be able to be okay, right? Port 10,000. Yes, you can. There's legal ports you can use, and you can modify this so you can run on whatever port you want, right? But let's go back to 3,000. That's kind of a standard one we use. It's convention. It's not really standard. It's a convention you see out there. So it's always port 8,000. Those are the two ports that we can use, right? So go here and put 3,000. Also, we can, instead of putting 127.0.0.1, we can also put localhost, like I talked about before. Localhost 3000 also works because localhost on a Windows machine is the friendly name for 127.0.0.1. Okay, that's what it is. So those two things are all the same.
We can vary from 3,000.
Yes, you can do whatever you feel works for you, right? But remember that that website will only work on that port. Okay, so just wanted to go through that part with you. All right, but we want to make multiple pages work, right? And I have my index.html. What if I wanted to make, does Bootstrap work? Like, how does it work now? I mean, is this an actual server that I can run anything I want? I want you to think about this as a static server. What we made is a static server serving static files. That's what we're doing. We're not serving up views necessarily. We have to do all that work ourselves, like we just did already. Like previously, the same stuff we've done before with Ajax and stuff, we'd have to do all those tricks to run things on the front end with Ajax. This doesn't support a view model, as an example. Not like this. We'd have to kind of program it a little differently. But I want to add this in. So, of course, if I'm going to add Bootstrap, I need to add them in like normal. Let's add Bootstrap in. So I'm going to go to my PowerShell here, and I'm going to just clear the screen. And I'm going to use yarn because we've been using yarn this whole time. So I'm going to say yarn add bootstrap, right? So this is what we normally do, right? And I also want to add font awesome. Let's add them all. Font awesome, right? I want that. I also want jQuery and popper.js, right? These are all the things I want to add. I can add all of them together. I don't have to do it separate lines, right? So if I press that and press enter, it's going to take all those things, grab all those packages, do the dependencies, and slap them into my own node modules. Yeah. Those are all the things we need for Bootstrap, right? Font awesome, we're using for fonts. So we have all the same things we normally have, right? And notice my package.json now has some stuff. It has some in the bottom. It has some dev dependencies for Node right now. And it has some dependencies for Bootstrap, Font Awesome, jQuery, and Popper. Dependencies means I need these files, these libraries, in order for my project to function. Okay, and now no difference on there. But let me just keep going. Now I want to get some code hinting for Bootstrap and for jQuery, let's say. So I'm going to go, yarn add at types. That's the code hinting, right? jQuery. At types, I don't know, Bootstrap, whatever else I want. And then I can say minus dev because those are development dependencies. They're not required for my function to go. It's just for me, for my application, right? So I add those in and notice it adds them in under dev dependencies inside my package.json file, right? It just lists them here. That's all it does. Okay, so this is important. And we know we're going to use engines. We need this engines part of our package.json. We talked about that yesterday because if you don't have that engines property in our package.json file, then Heroku won't know what engine we want. I don't want greater than or equal to. Let's make it specific this time. So I'm saying it's got to be 10.1 because that's what I'm running. You run whatever you're running. You should put this. You kind of align this to your version of Node and NPM. That's what I'm doing. So it's the same version. Whatever I have, my same feature set is what I want Heroku to run. Okay. All right. Let's use Bootstrap and jQuery and Node like we've been used to. We're going to make a very simple site. We don't have time to do everything else. But let's go into my index.html for a second, right? And I want to do what I normally do, right? So I don't have a content folder. Let's make a content folder. Let's see how smart our server is, okay? Because we want to make a content folder. Here's our content folder. And I also want to make a scripts folder. Let's do a scripts folder too, just like normal, right? It's all the same things we normally have. Content scripts. We might have assets too. We don't have that right now. But inside of our content folder, let's make a new file called app.css, right? And this file is going to be something we're going to add our custom CSS up here. So custom CSS goes here. We don't have any right now, but that's our app.css. And the reason why I put in something in there so it gets included in our GitHub when we put it up on GitHub, right? And in our scripts, let's make a script, a very simple, stupid script. We're going to call that app.js, right? And we're going to do our little iffy function, like we normally do, right? This is our little iffy that we normally have, right? Same thing we normally do. And we'll make a start function, nothing new here, okay? And we'll say console log. And this time we'll use the backticks. So backtick, and we'll say %c or console log, and we'll say app started, right? And we'll do something like a color. We'll change our color to blue, and we'll change our font dash size. I know people hate this. When I showed this first time, they're like, other developers like, oh my God, don't ever do that. Don't ever change the console. It's terrible. What are you doing? Hey, that's what I like to do. If you don't like to do it, don't do it. It just makes it easier for me to read, all right? Font size 30 pixels, that's what I want. And I also want my font weight to be bold, right, for my, my console. And of course, this is normal stuff. We've covered this before. It doesn't do anything else, okay? We're not going to make a complex site here. And we're going to use a window, add event listener on load. We're going to access my start method, okay? That's stuff we've done a million times so far, right? Well, not a million times, but many times throughout the semester, all right? And that's our little JavaScript file. We have our app and our JavaScript. Let's add them in like we normally would. So in our index.html, inside of our home, we're going to have a CSS section, just like normal, and we're going to just connect to it with a link. So we're going to say link/content/app.css. And see how smart our server is. Is this even going to work on our server? Hopefully, right? And on the bottom, we're going to have a script source, and we're going to say something like /scripts, and then app.js. So let's just do this first. So no Bootstrap yet, okay? Just this part. Do we get in our console app started? If we do, our server's working, right? If we don't, we get some weird error or something. Server doesn't work, doesn't know what to do, right? So very basic site. We didn't do anything different here. And if I go back to here, and if I refresh, you don't see anything apparently here. But if I go to my inspect and I go to console, then we got this beautiful thing that shows me that my app.js is working, right? So this is really important, guys. I mean, this whole connection thing, because now everything we've done in JavaScript, we can do now. We're just using a custom server as opposed to our light server, right? Well, if this is true, then I can add in the stuff that we need for Bootstrap. So Bootstrap, of course, allows us to do a link. Let's set this up. So it's on node modules, right? And then under node modules, it's Bootstrap, under dist, under CSS, under bootstrap.min.css, all stuff we've done before. Nothing new here, guys. Nothing new. Same thing with our link. We can go, well, let's add in font awesome. So node modules, again, font awesome, and then CSS, font awesome.min.css. And that all happens before our custom CSS, right? Again, nothing different. And let's go down to our scripts. So this is our script section. Hey, here's our comment for our HTML. So script section, right? In our script section, we're going to have our scripts now. Okay, so script, source, and we need node modules. We're going to do jQuery first, right? And dist jQuery.min.js, because jQuery is required to run Bootstrap. And then our Bootstrap stuff. So source, node modules, Bootstrap. And under dist, JS, and then bootstrap.min.js. Done. Those are the three things we need. So we have our Bootstrap connected. We have this stuff connected. And if I go back, now that I've saved this file, and if I go back to our terminal, all right, and I look at my thing here, it doesn't show me anything here, right here. Nothing else. It doesn't show that other things have started or whatever, but it looks like we're good. Like nothing else has changed, right? So how do we know that Bootstrap is installed and if it works without doing anything else? If I go back here, this text should change from Times New Roman to something else. Now we know Bootstrap is working, right? Because now our text is bootstrappy. Bootstrappy, right? I don't know, I made that up. Let's put in our we get Bootstrap. Let's go to get Bootstrap, and just like we've done before many times. Let's go to our components, and we'll go to our navbar, and in our navbar we'll grab our Bootstrap navbar. Let's copy this whole navbar, and I'll put it before my hello world. There it is. And you know what? Let me undo that. Let me put that navbar inside of a head. So I'll say header, right? This is my header, right? And inside my header, I want to put my navbar, right? I'm gonna organize this in a second. And one thing, of course, in my navbar, I want it to be dark. So I'll say navbar dark, background dark, dark theme. And I also want my navbar, instead of my navbar brand to say navbar, we'll say NodeJS demo. That's what we're doing, right? And again, nothing new here, guys. We've configured navbars before in our class. You guys should know this stuff. And by the way, you have an advantage, your class, because no one else is teaching Bootstrap in the other courses, I'm pretty sure. So here's my home and my link. I'll make an about page in a second. So there's my home and about, right? Those two links. And let's get rid of my dropdown. This one is my dropdown. I don't care about my dropdown. This part right here, this list item. And this list item, which is disabled link, we don't care about that, like we've done before. And we don't care about the form. We get rid of the search form. Yay. And now we have a standard, our little standard navbar that we've created that we've been working with time and again. Okay. Also, instead of MR auto, we want ML auto because I want to put the text on the right, right? That's what I'm doing. Here's my home, and I want to change this, right, to index.html just to test our page, as well as this one should be about.html. Don't have this about yet, but we will. Okay, so that's our page. That's going to be shown off. Node.js and blah. And if I go back here to our page, which is here, I'll pull this over here and refresh. Then you can see that here's our Bootstrap working nicely, right? Like normal. Except that if I go to about, it's going to give me my custom error page, right? This is what my custom error page is, because there is no about.html. Doesn't work, right? There's no about, so I'm getting this custom error page, right? Instead of cannot get, like we get with Light Server, right? So, okay, so that's something we've done. You know, let's, instead of hello world, let's put this, just to make it a little bit nicer, we'll put it in a div tag with a class of contents, right? And then inside that div tag with the class of content, we'll have another div tag with the class of row. Inside that div tag, we'll have another div tag with a class of column dash medium dash, I don't know, 8, right? And then we'll take this h1 and we'll pass it into this part here. That's just Emmet I'm using right now. And you know what? Just to keep it the same as what we had, we'll put it in a main tag. We'll take all this stuff here and put all this stuff inside of a main tag. Again, guys, nothing crazy. I'm going to select everything and right-click, and I'm going to format my document so it's a little bit more formatted. Right? There it is. So you can see how it's all nested properly now. Right? Okay, and if I go back and if I look at my document here, going back to this part, and if I refresh, right, this is what this is. Hello world. Does not work. Contents. Row class content medium 8. Why did it? That's not right. Is it contents? Did not flow. Did I not save this? Actually, this shouldn't be like here, right? It should be like over more, right? And the way to test this, of course, is to look at some contents, the approach for contents with headings and all this kind of stuff. on Bootstrap. I'm forgetting already. Container. You're right. Container. I'm forgetting. All right, so if I go back and I refresh, now it should work. Yes, that's what I wanted. So a little bit of pushed over. That's what I wanted to happen. And it's 8 columns instead of the full columns. That's fine. All right, I want to take the same thing and make the About page work. Instead of giving me this error 404 page, I just want to make the About page light up. So I'm just going to copy the index page. So here's my index page, right? I'll copy it. So I'll copy and I'll paste. And now let's rename this page from index 1, rename, to About. And a couple changes. Let's change my title to About. And we'll also change my, I'll embed this. I'll change my active links. So right now, my item active is on my index.html. We'll take this active link. We're not using anything to do this. We're just kind of typing it in for now. We're hard coding it. Later on, when we go next week, we're going to do some tricks to make this happen again on the back end, not the front end, right, of JavaScript, right? So all as normal, as we did before, right? And we've got an About page. Okay, well, let's see if it actually works, right? Because we got an About page. If I click on the About page, right, we should say About, but of course we didn't change our content. Still says Hello World. We'll just say About Node.js, right? Because that's what we're really talking about. And if I refresh, then now About Node.js is there. We can go back and forth between the 2 pages. It looks like we have a server, right? It looks like we have a server, and for the most part, we do. There might be some extensions we haven't covered, and we can always cover those extensions later on, some other time, right? But the idea is that this server runs locally. Okay, great, fantastic. My server runs, but it doesn't run anywhere. It runs on my system. It's locked to my system, and I'm going to have a problem I talked about before. I talked about this problem yesterday, and the problem is the port. I cannot run my server on Heroku or Azure or some other system provider with port 3000. They will block my port. They will not allow me to control which port they give me. It's got to run on port 80, in fact, somehow, right? And how the heck do I do that? How do I run my system on port 80, which will be blocked, right? Well, there's a thing for that. So let's go back. Are you guys all good with what I've done so far? This is just, again, we just made a very simple site, 2 pages, going back and forth, so you can prove that Bootstrap is working, JavaScript is working. We know how to do everything as normal on a simple, very simple baseline Node app that doesn't do anything else. So here, let's put this up on GitHub. So I'll say added Bootstrap, and we haven't done font awesome support. So we've done, right? So these are all the files. We have 350 files for that, and probably we could have got off with doing it less, but who cares, right? And that's cool. And now that I've done this, I'll add this as a commit. And then from here, I'm going to push it to GitHub. So you have everything that I have. Okay. Typically, we don't do it this way. Okay. Typically, we don't do it this way. Typically, like I said, we use CDN. It's lighter. Doesn't put stuff in our node modules folder, right? Node modules folder is only for development, right? Not for deployment, typically. Okay. All right, so that's cool. We've got our files. Everything is working now. And I have a problem, right? So let me just close all this down for just to make it simple. I have my scripts, but this scripts is client-side scripts. So all the stuff we've done this semester should be put inside the scripts folder. It's not going to be this kind of script. This is server-side script, right? So client-side, server-side. So really what I could do is I could take all this stuff, content and scripts, and put it in another folder called public, right? Or client, however you want to call it, right? And then I can do a path join, right? When I do a path join, I can path join. I'm going to show you that next week because that's too much today. I can do a path join, and I can join my public to the path so that it looks like scripts and content are on the root, but actually they're not. They're inside of public, right? So from an organizational perspective, right now, our stuff looks like all over the place. It looks like there's client and server files all together in one place. For us today, that's okay. Okay, it's okay for us today. But for the future, it's not going to be okay. So our app.js is only so only client-side stuff, but we really need this index.js to modify this. This is our server, in fact. Our server script is right here. And we can't use port 3000. We can't use port 3000, but there is something else. There's something called environment variables. The environment variables are variables. Think about memory locations that exist on the server, environment variables, right? And we can program them. We can make custom environment variables to hold things like API keys and that kind of stuff. And we can also, from a security standpoint, any kind of passwords you want to embed in linking to databases and all that stuff that you don't want to share on GitHub, right? You can save in your environment variables. But for now, let's make a use of an environment variable that's common. One of them, the way we access them is we use the keyword process, right? Notice it says on the right, NodeJS process dot, right? And then there's different processes we can tap into. One of them is environment, right? So this is the environment process dot. And now this is the problem. There is no other code hinting because there's so many types of variables. I want to look at the port, right? The port that we're going to get from the server, not our custom port 3000. Some port we're going to get something. We don't know what the port of the server is, right? Or this is like a, just instead of and, remember we have, logical and, this is logical or. We're going to say, hey, try and get the process environment port. And if it's undefined, forget this, just put port 3000 in there, okay? But this is a problem, right? Because that means that this port could be either a string or a number. That's what this is going to happen. And unfortunately, down in here, our listen requests that the port is a number, not a string, right? We need to convert the string to a number, right? Somehow, right? We need to parse the string and make it into a number, whatever the string that we're going to get from the server is. Because remember, any user interface that we use, including stuff that comes from the server, all comes through as strings. Now, it's probably going to work. 9 times out of 10, leaving it like this, it's going to work, right? But we want to make almost like a sanitize function, right? We want to sanitize my port and make it into a number. So I'm going to make a new function here because it can do this. Remember, this is JavaScript, right? You guys know JavaScript. I'm making a sanitize function. We'll call this sanitize port. Right? And we're going to take in some kind of port. I don't know what the port's going to be, right? And what I want to do is I want to check, if the port, what is this port? I'm also going to return, right, something out of this thing. I'm going to return, when I sanitize my port, I want to return a number, right? Whatever that port number is, okay? I want to return it back out again. I'm actually going to take it in, do something to it, and sanitize it, and return it back out the same way it came in, right? So one way to do it is I got to check to see if I can convert it, right? So I can say something like, can I convert if my port is not a number, so is nan, right? And if is nan, whatever that, so it says returns a Boolean value that indicates whether a value is a reserved value or not a number, right? If it's not a number, it's checking to see if my number that I'm passing in is not a number, right? And if it's not a number, then I want to make it into a number. I want to, kind of parse it and all that kind of stuff into a number, right? So let's try this out. So I want to kind of say that if it's not a number, and I want to pass in the port in here. So if the port is not a number, it's a string, right? I want to then parse int, right? So I want to say that port then is equal to, I want to parse int my port, right? Whatever the port is, right? And I can actually specify a radix, right? Which is like base, what base is it? Base 10, right? I want a base 10 number, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, hey, check to see if the port's not a number. If it's not a number, parse it into a number, all right? That's cool, right? And if it is a number, if it's already a number, just return it. just return it back out as a number. It's a number, it's a number. Yay! If it's not a number, change it into a number. Right? So I'm sanitizing. That's why I say it's called sanitized port. It's pretty simple. We want to check it locally first. So what I want to do is something like this, where I declare the port up here. I'm going to say I want to pass in one of these two values, right? And I can actually do this. I can say sanitized port. And I can pass in this value here. Now, how come this can work? Because it's going to pass in either this one or this one, right? So if this one exists, it'll take the number that the server gives me, sanitize it, turn it into a number, and return it back out and store it in port, right? If this doesn't exist, it'll just take the 3000 and store that in port. Either way, it'll be a number. And now, when I come down here, if I hover over the listen, you can see that the port is always going to be, it should always be a number because that's what I'm going to return. It says any, but actually it's a number. Can you guys get the door? Sorry, he's locked up. And let's test it to see if it still works. Yay, this works nice now, but let's test it and make sure it's okay, right? So I'm going to go back out here and refresh, and we're still good. Okay? One other thing we need to know is this. When it comes to Heroku, right? This is never going to work, ever. Hostname, that's never going to work. Why? They're never going to give us access to localhost, ever, right? So this 127001 is like, we're not even going to do anything with, right? And in fact, what we can do is we can shorten this up down here where instead of listen on port and hostname it's the local host is implied unless we ever otherwise put something in here. So we can actually take this completely out like this. Again, we're preparing to move this whole thing onto Heroku. And if I just did this and I took this part out, this hostname, we don't need it anymore, right? We have no hostname. And if I was to just do this, obviously this is going to fail, right? Because, and we can say on port, or actually on at hostname. It says at hostname. My hostname it is not a hostname, right? It's like localhost. I can just put in something like localhost like this. Like actually type it in, localhost, just to show that it works, and then whatever the port is, right? And if I did this, and I went to refresh, it still works. Even if I go to home, right? And refresh, it still works, right? Why is this working? Because we don't care locally. On the other end, though, right? There's no localhost, right? So we don't care about this thing. This will be ignored. This won't run on localhost, right? It'll just run on port whatever, and we'll never see this output, never, because this output's only going to be shown on the host on the server somewhere, okay? And we don't have access to that output. It's only on the server. The server people are going to see it, not us, right? Typically, we can also look at logs and all that kind of stuff later, but for the most part, we want to make these two changes. So now we're ready. We can put this on. This is the first part of making our server ready to put on Heroku. The other part we have to do is there's a couple of things we have to change. One is, again, just to reiterate, we need in package.json engines. We need to specify the engines. If you don't have this, Heroku doesn't know what to do with it. And the other one we need is a proc file. It's a special file that's required, and actually it's on your. If you actually go to your exercise for today, Lab 10, it tells you have to make a proc file, and let's make that. It's called proc file. It needs to be spelled exactly this way. Okay, it's not procfile.txt. It's not procfile something else. It's just proc file. I notice, Visual Studio recognizes it for a Heroku proc file. It gives you a little custom icon here, right, for me. And inside this, we're going to say that it is web, right? Node, and then index.js. We need to put that in there. And what this basically tells it is, hey, we're using a web service, and we're using Node, and we want to start, our entry point is index.js. So we have to tell the server how to start, kind of thing. By the way, this proc file is only for Heroku. It does not work, or is not even applicable to Microsoft Azure, or DigitalOcean, or any other service that offers Node support, okay? Only Heroku. Okay, cool. Let's upload these changes, right? So, making ready for Heroku. That's what we're doing, right? We're adding these little changes here, and we'll pushing this up to GitHub. Pushing this up to GitHub. Okay, guys, we're there. We can do Heroku now. First of all, you need to sign up for Heroku. And Heroku, I'm going to show you where that is. Again, I've kind of shared that with you, but I'm going to go to, I want to go to incognito mode here because otherwise Heroku is going to identify who I am. So here's Heroku. You're going to go to Heroku. Right, Heroku. It's a cloud app platform that you can sign up for free. Okay. I'm going to take this and put it up on Slack for us, right? Because this is where we need to go. So please go and sign up for Heroku for Lab 10. Okay, that's where it is. So please go to Heroku. We need to do that. When you sign up, and if I sign up, you can sign up with, make a free account, right? And once you create your free account, you can follow the way of doing that. I've already done it, my free account. So if I go to Heroku now, let's go to Heroku.
What should we select as our primary language? NodeJS?
Sure. Doesn't matter.
It will require as you do.
I know. It doesn't matter what it is. So here's my Heroku. I have a test that I did this morning just to make sure that it worked, right? And I'm going to make a new test today. Notice I have, when I go to Heroku, I have these two nodes, right? Because I have these two nodes are applications, actually. One of them was Starbase 12. Which I don't know if I showed you. I might have showed you that already. Starbase 12 is a game that I made 4 years ago, and it says that my app is asleep, right? Because no one's accessing that right now, so we're good to go. And the other one is this other thing that I made earlier today. To make a new one, when you get there, and again, I've got instructions on how to do that in your exercise, in your Lab 10. You're going to go click New. All right, so I'm showing you this, and I'm recording it for you guys to see it. I'm making a new application, new. Here's for your Lab 10, okay? I'm going to create a new app. There's two things you can do, a new app or a new pipeline. Forget pipeline for now. Let's just do app. And then my app name must be unique. I'm talking about unique in the entire world unique, okay? It cannot be something somebody else has ever used, right, or is currently using. So I'm going to call it, you must call it something else, but I'm going to call it COMP125 in the summer 2018 semester. And it's less than 12. Please don't call it the same thing or mine will fail, all right? And then I'm going to click Create App. If it's available, my app now is available. If you tried to make this name again, it would fail. It already exists. There's already an app like that, okay? So unique name. So I'm making a brand new unique name, okay, like this. And now I come to the point where it says there are some the overview of my app. There's nothing to add here. Resources that my app uses. Right now, it doesn't use anything. Metrics, activity. There's no activity. I just created my app. This is actually a little log that the app gives you, right? Access, right? Who do I have access to? It's me. I'm the only one that can access my Heroku app, right? And settings. And in settings, if you want to delete your app, if you go down to the bottom, just like in GitHub, you can just delete your app the same way, right? So if you didn't have an app that you liked, you can delete it. But deploy is where we want to be. And under deploy, there's going to be a couple of options. One of them is going to be GitHub. That's why this is a beautiful thing. I'm going to click on the GitHub option. When I click on the GitHub option, it tells me, hey, where do you want to look to get your GitHub stuff? I have a couple of accounts. One of them is Centennial. And I want to search for the name of my GitHub repo that I want to link to this application. So when I make an application on Heroku, it's an empty container. I want you to think about an empty container. And I'm taking I want to take the stuff on GitHub and I want to transport it to that container somehow, right? So I need to search for a name, the friendly name that is that name. So I know that it's something like COMP125. Let's say I forgot. I know what it is. I can search for that and it shows me all the projects that have COMP125 associated with them. And if that's not specific, I can specify summer 2018, and I want only the project for summer 2018 that are on my GitHub. By the way, sometimes what you need to do with GitHub is you need to give permission for Heroku to use GitHub. It'll ask you for permission, right? And then once you've done this part, I can choose the app that I want, which is lesson 12, which is right here. Okay, I want to connect that one. I'm going to click on the connect button. Alternatively, if you know the name, I can just literally put it in here. I can just say lesson 12 and search. And it'll only pull up that one and then click connect. Okay. When it connects, I haven't done anything yet. All I'm doing is connecting my app. And I want to also make sure that any changes I make to my app are automatically redeployed to Heroku, which means Heroku is going to be watching my GitHub repo for any changes I make and automatically redeploy my app to live, right? This is called a continuous deployment loop or continuous integration, if you will. So I'm going to click on enable automatic deploys, all right? And then on the bottom, final step is deploy branch. You can choose whichever branch you want. I only have one branch right now, my master branch, but if I had multiple ones, I can choose which branch to deploy. I'm just going to deploy my master branch by clicking deploy branch. And now you're going to get a little log that you can look at, guys. This is really cool. It says, okay, here's my engines. It detects my engines as 10.1. It detects my NPM as 6.1. And it says something like resolving Node version 10.1, downloading and installing Node. So it actually does some work on the background. Automatically, it's a script that's running. It's bootstrapping NPM 6.1 because that's the one I told it to download, that version of NPM, right? It's resolving Yarn because I'm using that Yarn, downloading and installing Yarn 1.92, installed Yarn, and then it did all this stuff really, really quickly, and then I have this little view button. Okay, this is the go button. If I click this button, we should have a brand new app running live right here, and we do. If I click about, we're good to go. And if I put something else in here, like for example, some other funky stuff, here's my funky link.html. It's going to give me my error page, right? My custom 404 page. Guys, go there, check it out. It's live right now, right on Heroku. So my site is the name of my app, COMP125 S2018 lesson 12.herokuapp.com. And that's my site. Okay, so it's an actual site running Node, my custom Node application on Heroku. Okay, and that's your lab 10. Okay, if you can do that, you're good to go with lab 10. You need this part for your assignment 4. Okay, so lab 10 is supporting assignment 4. So please go there and do this kind of stuff. It's a very simple application. A couple more things for Heroku before we stop. Is I want to go to the top and I want to look at activity this is the Heroku app itself, right? If I look at activity, the activity tab, under the activity tab, I can see that I initially released this app on this particular day. Up here, it tells me enable logplex, all right? And then there's this build log that I can look at. I can always look at my build log if it fails to see what happened, right? It'll tell you everything you need to know in your build log. If I click this, it actually is a little console log that tells me everything. So if I go through here, Node.js app detected. It tells me that. And it says, here, I'm going to make this a little bigger so you guys can see this. So this is the build log. So Node.js app detected, creating runtime environment, npm config, right? Node, here's node verbose false. Node env is production. We're going to talk about that next week, where you can change from production to development. Production environment is what we're in right now. We're actually producing live. Installing binaries, so Node, npm, and Yarn. These are actually downloaded these packages, right? Node, npm. When you say binaries, it's like, I don't know, node.exe, yarn.exe. We're actually downloading those things in our server. Equivalent. Resolving Node version 10.10 because that's the version I told it to do. Yeah?
So all this stuff is downloaded in Heroku?
Yeah, it's all up online. Heroku is running a script. The app service is running a script for us and downloading all the required information or the versions of Node and npm that it needs, and Yarn too, right, to make this work. And then it says once this is all done, npm is resolved and installed, right? So it says so resolved Node, npm installed Yarn, does all the installations for you, and then it restores the cache, right? It goes down to building dependencies, and then it looks at Yarn install 1.92. It fetches the packages if I need to, and then it says linking dependencies, building fresh packages. It almost like installs everything again for us, right? And then clearing previous node cache, saving to cache directories, node modules. Here's node modules and any Bower components. Because before we didn't use Yarn, we used Bower. I think I talked about that earlier in the course. We don't use Bower, but it supports Bower just in case you use that package manager instead of Yarn or NPM, right? And then it prunes development dependencies because we don't need them. So it takes away the development dependencies, all that @type stuff, it gets rid of because we don't need those kind of things. That's why it's so important to put your dev dependencies in the right order. If you don't need your dependencies for your project, put them in dev dependencies as -- dev, and then it will prune those out. It'll make your app a little lighter, right? And then it links all the dependencies properly, right? And then it says build succeeded. And this is the key. This is what I want to always see, okay? Always, always. If it says build failed, that would be bad, okay? And there's many things that can cause a build to fail. One thing is some port you're telling it to do. If you don't do process.env.port, that whole sanitization thing we talked about, it will fail 100% because Heroku can't allow you to run things on 3000. It's not done, right? Discovering process types. And notice I have a proc file. It says proc file declares types web, right? I told it in the proc file that I want to use a web process, right? Compressing 23.9 megabytes for my whole little application. Remember, it's a server that I'm running, 23.9 megs. Release v3, and then now we have this thing here. It says, this is my site deployed to Heroku. And this is a live site that it generates for you on Heroku. And I went through this whole build with you because I want you to understand all the stuff that can possibly go wrong.
So then we can access the website.
Yeah, that's the link to the website. And that's the link I want you to give me when you submit version, kind of lab 10. Your lab 10 is going to be different from mine because you can't use my link. My link is unique. COMP125 S2018 lesson 12. It only works for me, not for you. You'd have to call it lesson 12B or something else. Right? It's unique. Are we good? Okay, things to note. I just want to point this out to you guys, all right? This is a beautiful thing, right, what we've done here, because we've actually got our own custom server that does one thing, serves up our little page. That's all it does. And it's inside of a container. Our server doesn't serve anything else. It just serves our stuff. We're actually running a little virtual machine on Heroku. And it's all it does, a little piece of Heroku. It's probably in a container, I'm guessing, right? And inside of Heroku, it has its own little operating system, a part of the operating system that's just running for us. It's almost like a little node that's running our application, okay? That's why it's called Node, right? That's the reason why it's called Node in many ways. Node.js is like a little node, that's little thing that's just there, and it's blinking just for us, all right? And if you think about this, if I go back, right, and if I have these three apps, notice my app is this little purple hex that's colored kind of like a really weird purple color, but it's like solid. And these ones have Z's in them. These are sleeping nodes, right? This is an active node,
so
right?
One is active at a time. No.
The reason why these are sleeping is because no one's accessing them. So if I go back to my little game, starbase12.herokuapp.com, and I quickly access it, I'm not going to play it because it's pretty loud, right? It's going to corrupt my whole broadcast. But this is what Starbase 12 is right here, running at, of course, right? And by the way, these three things I modeled. I actually created models of them in Blender, and I basically took a snapshot of the scene and included them here. So those are the three things. But now that I've accessed this stuff, and if I click actually start, it actually works. But if you go back to Heroku, and if I refresh, you can see now that I have two of solid hexagons, right? One of them for Starbase 12 because I, made it live. I kind of, said hello, right? And now Starbase 12 is alive and ready to go again, right? Notice that this is running on Heroku 16. This is the actual server, but my little Starbase 12 is running on Cedar 14. Back in the day, they had different names for the little pieces of the VM that it's running on. This is running on a different machine. Cedar 14 is a different virtual machine that's physically on Heroku, and it's going to allocate whatever machine it feels necessary for that particular application at the time. Heroku is a very powerful, professional level service, all right, that you can use. It has so many resources that you can attach. Notice it says installed add-ons $0 per month. I can install many different add-ons on Heroku. And if I go to resources, right, as an example, it says, I'm not even update. I'm using free dynos. Dynos are basically best effort. I'm not going to have, my performance is going to be pretty low right now because, hey, I only have you guys watching this stuff. There's nothing going on. If I want more performance, I can have professional level, processors and memory associated with my application. I'm not doing that right here, okay? And so I can find more add-ons, right? So if I want to search for add-ons, if I want to search for something like MLab, right? I can add a I can add a Mongo Lab or Mongo database. We talked about a NoSQL database. I can add that in as an add-on, right? To my project, right? So I can add components to my project, add-ons, right, to my project where I can add a database component if I want. Yeah, so I just go to under resources. I can go to add-ons and I can search for whatever I'm searching for MLab. MLab is if I want MySQL, there's also ClearDB if I want a MySQL add-on, and I can associate that particular add-on with my application that I'm running. Okay, outside the scope of this course, we don't have time. All right, but definitely you can add in whatever add-ons you want, and then they might cost money. Yeah, sometimes they're not. Right? I mean that's why Heroku. That's where Heroku makes his money too, right? And also makes his money on other things, on performance. MLab has a free sandbox account that you can tap into, which we will deal with in COMP125. I can't do that here. We have no time. All right, so we've got this piece, and I'm going to show you Azure now. Okay, just as an alternate, because we did it on Heroku, and I always like to show Azure. Again, Azure is free for students. You can find your access to Azure on E5 on the hub.com, right? Microsoft Azure. Every one of you has access to Azure, okay? And if I want to find your school, if I go to college and university, on the hub is almost like discounts or free student applications, right? And if I go to country, I'm going to pick Canada. State, I'm going to pick Ontario. School, I'm going to pick Centennial. And if I go to Centennial College, not this one, not TextM, but this one, right? I can choose my department, which is CTES, right? So you can see that I have access, and it's going to show me all of the applications that I can download from Microsoft for free because you're part of Centennial College, okay? Including Visual Studio Enterprise and new Microsoft Azure for Students, okay? This is pretty cool. If you click on this thing, it'll actually show you. I'm not sure if this will work for you because I might be logged in, but this is the link. Let me just go. I don't think I can go back. I want to see if I can actually look at the CTAS web store. This one is the one you need, so I'm going to kind of click this one. I'm going to put this up on Slack. So this is the, so we'll say CTAS web store. Okay, that's what it is. That's the one you would get from on the hub, right? This is all your free applications you can download, right? And you have to use your Centennial College access to do that, okay? So whatever your sign-in would be for that. And you can register. You might have to also register. And once you register, you have access. And then you want to go to Azure for Students, and you can add it to cart and follow the instructions. And it'll give, basically what it gives you is, it gives you $100 in Azure credits for 12 months, okay? However, I highly recommend you don't do this right now, okay? I don't recommend you make an Azure account yet. Why? Next semester, you're going to be doing COMP125, and you can use Azure to host your .NET applications live, right? I recommend you wait until next semester to activate this, right? Because then you'll get $100 in credits for 12 months starting next semester, which means that you'll have it longer, right? If you do it now, for me, you can do it, but it's not really required. All right, but let's suppose you went through this whole process anyway and you want to set up Azure. You don't care for 12 months. You just want to use it now. By the way, the $100 you can use for anything. You can use it to make virtual machines. You can use it to make SQL servers. You can use it to make all kinds of things. Okay, whatever you want. So if I go back to Azure, the way you get to Azure is you type in portal.azure.com. Portal.azure.com is Microsoft's portal. I'm just going to get into. I'm going to sign out of this one. Sorry, let me sign back in again as me. Right, otherwise I won't see what I'm supposed to see. So this is me. This is my portal. And now this is the really good thing about Microsoft, which I like a lot, right? One thing I love about Microsoft's Azure portal, and I got to say this, is it's got a GUI. It's got a really cool GUI, right? And it's a lot better in many ways than Heroku in terms of how it looks. I like the dashboard. I love this stuff. If you're addicted to GUI, Microsoft is for you, right? On the left, I want to create a new resource, right? And if I create a new resource here, I can create whatever resource I want. For example, a web resource. And I can create a web app. Now, there's different apps you can make. Notice I can't pick a Node app from here. I can't sit there and go like, I want to make a Node app. You're just going to pick web app. All right, I need to give it a unique name, just like in Heroku. I need to give this name whatever it's going to be. I'm going to make it so it's COMP125 summer 2018 lesson 12. I can do this because it's on AzureWebsites.net, not on Heroku. My subscription is DreamSpark. This is the old subscription for students and professors that I'm using. It doesn't apply to you, but you'll have something similar when you sign up to Azure through E5 on the hub. Okay? And then I'm going to create a resource, or I can use a new one. I can use an existing resource. I can pull down different resources. Each of these resources are areas. Microsoft has different data centers across North America and across the world, right? So this is a professional level service, like similar to Google Platform or Amazon Web Services. I'm going to choose one that I've already created called Canada East, because that's where we are, right? So Canada East. And it says App Service Plan Location. I want to make it free. I want to make my free service. I don't want to pay for anything, right? By the way, if you sign up for Microsoft Azure and put your credit card in, you can still do this. You can still choose a free service because Microsoft will allow you to serve up very simple apps with no cost, as long as they don't have a domain name associated with them. So I'm just using this little app, okay? I'm going to click Create. Again, this is just for your knowledge. I don't expect you to do this for your lab or for your assignment. Or this is how you do it in Azure. I click Create. And what this does is it creates a container, just like it did with Heroku, up on Microsoft. And I'm going to see it now. I should see it if I did it properly. And I probably didn't do it properly. I probably didn't say click on and add it to my home. If I want to look at all services, I can look at my all my services. These are all my things I have, right? I can look at my dashboard. I can look at all resources. And if I look at all resources, there is going to be a resource there that I just created, which is COMP125 lesson 12, right? And there's probably a checkbox that I missed for putting it on my dashboard, but that's okay. Probably up here. I want to pin that to dashboard. All right, so now that I've got that, notice it says that my app was going to run at COMP125 S2018 lesson 12.azurewebsites.net. That's the actual external web link. But I got nothing here, right? Because my app is not, there's nothing on my app. It's just an empty container, just like it would be on Heroku, right? Now, this is the complexity that Microsoft gives you. It's much more complex to set up Microsoft. That's why I did not suggest Microsoft. I suggested Heroku, because Heroku is straightforward. It's click, 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 you're ready to go. Here's what you have to do for Microsoft. I'm going to go to deployment options. Under deployment options, I'm going to choose GitHub, very similar to what we did with Heroku, right? Under GitHub, I need to choose my project. So I'm going to choose Centennial College. I'm going to choose my project, right, in my master branch. And then I'm going to click OK. And my friends, sometimes, even though it says successfully deployed, right, when I refresh, I want to see this have a check mark as well. What it's doing is it's fetching from GitHub from this thing, and I'm actually deploying it directly to Microsoft. Now, because I'm doing it this way, it also does a continuous deployment. So when I change something in my GitHub, it automatically uploads and changes things on Microsoft. Now, Microsoft has become better over the years in detecting a web application that's Node-based, right? So now what I'm asking it to do is, hey, detect that I'm actually running Node. That's what I'm asking it to do. And now you see what I have a problem. It says that I have an issue. It says failed, right? And if I go back, I can actually look at the log and see what made my activity fail. It tells you what it's doing. And it's going through, it says, no available Node.js version matches application version constraint of 10.1.0. So Microsoft has all of these versions. Look, these are all the versions that it runs, including 8.11 and 10.00 and 10.6. But hey, man, it says, I can't run your 10.1. Tells me what the problem is. Hey, I'm just telling you what the problem is, right? So I could upload everything differently and change everything, right? And it doesn't take me anything to do, right? Literally, all I have to do is comply with one of these versions, 10.0.0 or 10.6.0, and I'll be good to go. So let's try this out. So I'm going to go back. Hold on. Go back to my local files. Remember, Heroku's also watching, right? I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to change in my index.js where it says in my package.json, where it says my node version is 10.0. I'm going to change this node version to 10.0 instead of 10.1 and save. And then I'm going to go up to my GitHub and I'm going to say changed node version for Azure compatibility, right? Compatibility. I think maybe I spelled it right. I don't know. And then I'm going to go here and push. Now, because it's watching, the first thing I want to see is, did I break my Heroku site? So I'm going to go back to Heroku. So that's over here. And let's watch it change. So I'm going to go to activity. I know I'm running over time, guys. And what I want to see is, I want to see that this activity thing is going to change. Because now that I've uploaded this new thing, Heroku is watching. And now you can see that automatically the build is in progress. Heroku says, hey, I got a new building coming, right? And if you look at the build progress, it shows you that it's 10.0.0. It says resolving node version 10.0.0, downloading and installing this new version. That's why Heroku is a little bit better, in my opinion. And hopefully, at the end, right, when we go to the bottom, build succeeded. This is a good thing. And then launched. So if I go back to my home, which is on Heroku, and I press refresh, my friends, it should work, right? It shouldn't give me a weird error, right? That's what I'm hoping it doesn't give me. If it says like, it doesn't work or something like that, that would be bad. So now I'm good. Heroku is working, no problem. Let's fix Microsoft now. All right, so that was my log, right? For Microsoft, right? I don't want that one. And I want to go to my deployment options. And now there's a check mark. What the heck? What does this check mark mean? Does that mean I'm live? Right? I'm being facetious, guys. But if you look at the top, I can actually click on this link. And maybe if we're lucky, then we're going to run it. And of course, we're not lucky, right? Because Microsoft doesn't like something else, right? And no matter how many times I do this, by the way, it won't work. I can always go back and check what it is. Hey, I'm telling you, Microsoft's a little finickier, a little more finicky than Node is. And I can always check my log. So when I check my activity log, I can go through this and take a look of what's going on, my build log, right? So here's my deployment options, like I did before, and I can click on this. I want to see this log. So here's my log. It says it deployed, right? Here's my log, but I can look at this, right? Because this is my latest deployment where it says change node version for Azure compatibility. I can look at my log now, right? And let's see what it says. It says selected npm version 6.1. Updating is node YML. npm notice created a lock file as the package. And it says finished successfully. But something went wrong, right? It says using startup script index.js from package.json, generated web config, and it does all the things I need. But somehow my package still doesn't work. And I'm sorry, guys. It's just the way it goes, right? Sometimes you know, you're lucky and things work nicely. And I'm being honest with you, I'm working on Microsoft, and I'm running a basic Node service too, which Microsoft doesn't like. And sometimes we have to run Express, and Express will run nicely on Microsoft. Yeah.
There's something available on Google.
Yeah, if I Google it, I'm sure I can figure it out. Oh, I mean, Google, like Google Cloud Platform. Yeah, I'm not going to show you that. That's another whole other course we're talking about. There's a web course that does that.
It should be available.
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it here. So questions around this, question around what I've done today, because again, for your lab, you need to do what I just kind of did for Heroku. I just wanted to show you just in case you wanted to go crazy with Microsoft. That's an option, but there are some tweaks you have to make it run. Heroku, it just runs. It's good, it's solid, and it's everything that we need for this course, for the remainder of the semester. All right, there's no more questions, then we'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to get into Express.js. So if you want to read ahead, I did put a PowerPoint up in PDF form that you can read. But please finish off. Remember, your assignment number 3 is due, right, this week, Friday. And your assignment 4 is due by the end of semester. And your lab 10 is due tonight. All right? Good luck, and we'll see you next week.
You said it was 229.